So the next thing that I want to work on is to add in some projectiles. So I've already got bullets working pretty well in the last video, but now I want to add in some grenades that the player can throw. And because I've kind of set up most of the framework for projectiles and damage from bullets already, adding in grenades isn't really that much more difficult. So again, I'm going to do them in the same way. I'll create them as another sprite class. So I'm just going to copy this section at the top for my bullet class. I'll just copy all of that, and then I'll just paste it underneath where I'm going to create the grenade class. So I'll just start changing some of these things. Of course, it's a different name, so this class is called grenade. I keep all of this the same because this is also going to be a sprite class. And then the variables or the arguments are going to be X and Y position and in the direction, so I can throw them left and right depending on where the player is facing. Now after that, I've got this line just as I did with the bullets. That's just because I'm inheriting from the sprite class. So this was going to need a couple of additional variables. So for one, a grenade is going to have a fuse timer. So it's not going to explode straight away. It's going to sit there for a little bit and then it's going to blow up. So let's add a self.timer, and I'm just going to set this to 100. So again, I'm not adding this as an argument within here because every single grenade is going to have the same timer. I don't want to have to set a different timer for different grenades. But of course, you could do that if you had different grenade types. So the other thing is I need a velocity. Now, just as I have speed here, which shows how far it moves left and right, the grenade is going to get thrown up the way. So it actually needs a vertical velocity. Now, I already showed how to do this when I created the player class, and if you remember, I had a velocity underscore y variable, this vel.y. And this starts off kind of the same way as when the player jumps or falls based on gravity. So when the player jumps, if you remember, the velocity is set to a negative value because the y-coordinate is up in a negative direction because 0 is at the top. So in the same sense here, when I create a grenade, I want it to immediately start by being thrown up the way. So I want it to have a negative velocity. So I'll just set this to -11. You can tweak pretty much all of these numbers and that's going to change the trajectory of your projectiles. So then I want the speed, which is its horizontal speed. I'll set that to 7. So that's its vertical and that's its horizontal speed. Next one here is the image. Of course, I need to change this and I will need to go up. So this will be grenade image. I haven't loaded this in yet, so I'll go up and do that in a second. Then I get the rectangle from it just as before, and I set the rectangle's X and Y coordinates. And then lastly, I've got the direction. So that's it. I just need to go and load this image so that this class can be created. So we come up to here, and just where I've got my bullet, I can now load in my grenades just underneath it. I'll add a comment first, grenade. And I'm just going to copy this down because it's pretty much the same code. So we change this to grenade image, not grande. Grenade image, PyGame image.load. It's located in the same folder for me, but you just need to check where you've saved yours. So then it's grenade.png and then convert alpha. So that's it. The image is loaded. I'll run the code just to make sure there's no issues. There's no syntax errors, but of course I'm not loading the grenades because I don't have a button for them to be thrown yet. So I'm going to do this in the exact same way as I did the bullets. So if I come back down here where I've got my event handling section, I have A, D, space. So space is what produces the bullets. I'm just going to add in another one. I'll copy this down for my grenades. And I'm just going to choose the letter Q for this one. So you can choose, again, whatever you like, but I'm going with Q. And the variable that I need is grenade. So let's say grenade equals true. And now we do the same thing for when the buttons are released. So copy this down from space and just change that one to grenade equals false. Now, oops, I'm going to change that to Q. Now, the only difference here is that with my bullets, I was controlling it based on a timer or a cooldown. With grenades, I'm not going to do the same thing. Instead, I just want to be set this on a trigger. So once I press Q, I don't want to be able to hold it and be able to throw more and more grenades. So I'm going to have another variable in addition to grenade. So at the moment, I just have grenade equals true or grenade equals false. I will add another variable, and I'll explain that in a second when I do. So now that I've got my grenade trigger, I need to actually process it just the same way as I did here with if I'm shooting. So under here, I'm just going to add another section and I'll say throw grenades. So that's going to be, so I already have an if shoot. So elif, I don't want to be able to shoot and throw grenades at the same time. So I'll say elif grenade, which is my trigger. I'll add more checks to it in a second, but for now this is the only check that I need. So if I've triggered a grenade, then remember the way I did the bullets creation was I created an instance of the bullet and then I added it to a bullet group. So I'm going to do the same thing with grenades. Now I added this as a method because I wanted the player and the enemies to be able to shoot. But for the grenades, it's only the player that needs to be able to do it. So I'm not going to bother creating a grenade method because I don't need the enemies to be able to access it. So it doesn't really make any difference. I can just keep it in here. But before I do, I've just realized I haven't created a group for them yet. So I've created my sprite group for my bullets, but not for my grenades. So I better do that before I forget and it throws an error. So let's add in here grenade group equals pygame.sprite.group. So that's a blank group created for my grenades. So now that means that within this trigger, I'm able to create instances of it. So let's say grenade equals an instance of the grenade class. And remember the inputs are just the X and the Y coordinate and then the direction. So it's going to be more or less exactly the same thing as I did with bullets. I'm going to be taking the player rectangles variables. So I'll say player.rect.center X. I'll start off like this and then I'll correct it as it goes. And then as player.rect.center Y. And then lastly, it is player.direction. So that's going to create an individual grenade. And then remember, I need to add it to my grenade group. So we say grenade underscore group dot add, and I add in that grenade that I just created. So with this created, I need to make sure that my groups are being updated. So I've got my bullet group being updated and drawn. Just do the exact same thing for grenade group dot update and grenade group. Let's just copy this down. Grenade group draw screen. Now, of course, these haven't been defined yet. Grenade group. These haven't been defined, but like I said before, they are already existing because I've inherited the properties of the sprite class. So this should all work now, I believe. The only thing is I've created this new trigger, grenade. And remember, when I created these action triggers, I need to make sure that I am defining them right at the beginning, at the top of the code, where I've got defined player action variables. So I've got moving left and right and shoot. Well, now I've just added a new one, so I need to start off with grenade equals false. So let's run this code just to see if it works, and I'll press Q. There you go, a little grenade has just appeared. So I'm kind of following the exact same process that I did for bullets. I'm creating a grenade, starting off in the middle, so I don't want that. I want to be able to actually throw them. And notice it's doing the same thing, that if I hold Q, I just create a whole bunch of grenades. So I'll tackle those things one at a time. First of all, let's fix the height so that the grenades aren't appearing in the center of the character or the player, but actually getting thrown out of him. So we come up to down here where I create the grenades, and rather than creating them right in the middle of the player rectangle, just like I did with the bullets, I want to add on the player rectangle size. So that is player.rect.size. And 0 gives me the width, so it's size in the X direction. I'll multiply that by 0.5 times. And then, of course, I need to know the direction of the player so that the grenade can appear on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, depending on which way he's facing. So player.direction. So that's going to fix the X coordinate. If I run this again and throw a grenade, now it appears, but it's still appearing where the bullet would. So it's kind of just coming out of the gun. That's not really what I want. I actually want the grenade to kind of come out on top of the player. So that means that I need to adjust the Y coordinate as well. Now this line is starting to get pretty long, so I'm going to split it. So right here where I have this comma after the X coordinate, I'm just going to add a backslash and hit enter. So that allows you to split a line over 2. And you can keep doing that. You can split it as many times as you want. I'm just going to fix this indentation though so that it looks a bit better. So bring it out to here. It doesn't quite line up. I'll just bring it out to here, so it's kind of in line more or less with grenade. So that's the X coordinate covered. Now I just need to do the Y coordinate. And for this one, I kind of just want it to be the player's Y center plus. So if I want it to come out the player's head, then perhaps I can just do player rect top. Let's try that. Run this, and there we go. So the grenade is kind of coming out exactly where I want it. If you're imagining the player is throwing it, okay, I don't have an animation for that, but this is kind of the trajectory that it would take. So now I need to be able to throw that grenade and actually make it move and follow this kind of path. But before I do, I want to fix this issue with just creating endless amounts of grenades. So remember, I said that I don't want to have a cooldown for this. Instead, I want to have a trigger. So this trigger, in addition to grenade, I'm going to have a check which is called grenade thrown. So when I've thrown a grenade, I don't want to be able to throw another one until I've released the Q button. So here I'll say elif grenade and grenade thrown. Remember, I haven't declared this yet, so I will need to do that. So if grenade thrown is false, so we haven't thrown a grenade yet, then as soon as we create a new one and add it to the group, then let's set that variable grenade thrown to true. So that means if I run this again and I hold Q, of course I haven't defined this variable yet. So let's do that first. So I just need to go up to the top where I'm creating all of my player action variables. So just underneath grenade, I say grenade thrown and set that to false. So I'll run this code again. Now if I hold Q, I created a grenade, but if I do it again, I'm not able to create any more. So it is working, it's just only half of it is working. And the reason for that is I've set this variable to true, meaning that I have thrown a grenade, but I'm not setting it back to false at any point. Now the time that I want to set it back to false is when I let go of the Q button here. So as well as saying grenade equals false, let's also say grenade thrown equals false. So now I can run around and hold Q, nothing happens, but if I press it again, I generate another grenade. So instead of a timer or instead of a cooldown, this is more of a on a press. So I can press as quickly as I want and I'll throw grenades in quick succession. But grenades are going to be a little bit more scarce than ammo anyway. I'm only going to have a few of them. So that's not really that much of an issue. So in fact, before I do any more with the grenade trajectory, let's add in a number of grenades. So just the same way as I've added in ammo, I can do the same thing for my grenades here as well. So let's add it as another argument. I'll say here grenades. That way the player and the enemies can, well, I don't want the enemies to have grenades, but the player will have grenades here. And then just underneath, so I've got my health, got ammo, shoot cooldown. So just underneath here, just to keep it together with my ammo, I'll say self grenades equals grenades. So now all of these instances are going to have some grenades. Now I need to make sure that because I've added an extra argument, my instances also have this extra argument in them. So these guys here need to have one more argument at the end. So the player, I'll give him 5 grenades, and the enemies, I don't want them to have grenades, so I'll just put 0. So that's going to show how many grenades I have, but of course I'm not actually checking when I throw a grenade to see whether I've got grenades to throw. So I need another check in here. So let's say and player.grenades is greater than 0. So as long as I actually have a grenade to throw, then I can carry out this code here, throw a grenade, but then of course I need to subtract one from that because I've just thrown one. So player.grenades is subtracted by 1. And I can demonstrate this working. So actually I'll split this out a little bit and just add a comment to say reduce grenades. Maybe just swap this round, put this at the top. So reduce grenades first and then say that we have just thrown one. And so what I can do just temporarily is add a little print statement here to say player.grenades. So this effectively shows how many grenades the player has. So if I run this code again and I start throwing these grenades, so I've got 4 left, now I've got 3, 2, 1, 0. So that's all 5 grenades thrown. And now if I keep pressing Q, nothing happens. I'm not able to throw any more grenades, and this number is not changing anymore. So that's all working pretty well. I've got all of that set up. The only thing left to add now is this actual trajectory so that the grenades move. And that's going to be done within the grenade class itself because I want each grenade to act on its own. So all of them are going to be thrown from different positions as the player moves around, and they might bounce off different things. So I want all of them to handle their own kind of speed and movement independently. So for that, I just need an update method. Just like I have with the bullets and with the player, I just have define update in here. It doesn't need any arguments, so I just put in self. And remember, the two things I need to control are going to be my y velocity, so that the grenade falls back down to the ground, which is affected by gravity, and then the speed horizontally. So when I was moving the player, I had a delta x and a delta y variable. I'm going to do the exact same thing here for the grenades. First of all, I need to adjust this y velocity based on gravity. So it starts off at -11, means that it's going to shoot up at a rate of 11 pixels at each iteration, but I want gravity to slow it back down, so eventually it gets to a peak and then it starts to fall back down. So we'll say here self.vel_y is increased by gravity, which I've already defined before. So that's going to change this y velocity variable. And now I can change my dx and dy variables accordingly. So dx is the delta x. So this is the change in the x coordinate of the grenade. And that's simply determined by the speed of the grenade as well as the direction that it's been thrown in. So I just need to multiply the two together. I can say the direction, so either positive or negative, multiplied by the speed. And for the dy, well, that's just equal to, oops, I didn't press enter there. So dy is just equal to this y velocity. So with those done, I just need to add them onto my rectangle. So this is exactly the same way as I did the player update method, or the player move method, sorry. Now that I've got this change in the x and y coordinate, I can update grenade position. So I can upgrade this accordingly. So I can say self.rect.x is increased by the change in the x coordinate, and self.rect.y is increased by the change in the y coordinate. So I believe I'm already calling the update method here. So I've got draw and update. So this should work straight away. Let's try it. So I press Q, and there you go. The grenade flies out, and you can see it kind of follows this trajectory as it first moves up. Gravity slowly, quickly brings it back down, and then it just keeps falling through. I've run out of grenades to throw now. So the one thing that I could add here is for the grenade to stop when it hits this imaginary ground. And that's quite easy to do. I can go back into my, go back up into this grenade class, and I just add it within the update method. I just need to do an additional little check for effectively collision with the ground. So I can just do that the same way as I did for the player. If I come up to the player's move method up here, so you remember I'm moving left and right, then I'm jumping, got gravity, and then here is where I'm checking collision with the floor. So let's just copy this code because it's effectively going to be the exact same thing. I copy this down into my grenades update method. This of course is temporary because that floor is just for, just to play around with just now because I don't have a level loaded in yet. So I've got this collision with the floor being checked. If self-rect bottom, so the underside of the grenade rectangle plus the dy variable, which remember is this change in the coordinate, if that exceeds 300, which is this temporary floor, well, then I just want to make sure that I only move it by that amount. I don't need this self in air, that was just specific to the player. And then of course I need to put that before I update the position, otherwise it's going to be a little bit too late. So that should work. Let's just run that and see. I think that should cover it. So if I throw a grenade, there you go, it's working. So the grenade, of course, it keeps moving, right? It keeps sliding along, but it's no longer falling through the ground. So it basically just drops down, hits the ground. That dy variable becomes 0 as it approaches the ground, or as it hits the ground, so it doesn't fall any further. And then it just keeps continuing moving on the x coordinate. So I can stop that as well. I can make it stop moving along, and that's quite straightforward because when it hits the ground, I can just say that the speed becomes 0. So let's say self.speed equals 0. So if I run this again, as soon as it hits the ground, it stops. So at the moment I can throw them off the screen, but I'll address that in a second. But now it's working well. They're not falling through the ground and they're not sliding along anymore. You could add in bouncing if you wanted to, but that's a little bit more complicated to do, especially if you've got a level to work with. So I've just made it that when the grenades hit the ground, they kind of stick and that's it. They don't go anymore. Now the only other thing to add here is when I hit the edge of the screen. So I already have that kind of check in my bullet class. So remember here, I'm moving the bullet and then I check if the bullet has gone off the screen. Well, I can just copy this section down and reuse it here. So I've checked collision with the floor. Now let's check collision with, check if, well, let's just change that. So check collision with walls. I'll call them walls. So when we hit the side of the screen, I want the grenade to bounce off it and bounce back. So this is going to be exactly the same then. If the rectangle right hand side has gone, no, actually that's not going to be the same. I have to tweak this a little bit. I have to make it a little bit more similar to what's going on with the vertical collision. So I'll say if left rectangle left plus dx, so the change in the x coordinate, if that moves the grenade off the screen to the left, or if self-rect right plus dx is greater than the screen width, then, well, we don't want to kill the grenade. We actually just want to flip the direction. So then we say self.direction is multiplied by -1. So if it was positive, it becomes negative, and if it was negative, it becomes positive. So it just flips. Rather than going to the right, it goes to the left. But then I also need to make sure that I change this dx variable, because this dx variable is defined up here first of all. I'm then changing the direction, but it's a little bit too late for that because this is not being updated. So let's just make sure that I copy that in here and basically say that if I have changed direction, I need to change the dx accordingly. So let's just make sure this works. Throw the grenade, and there you go, it bounces off the side of the screen. So you see they bounce off, and then the vertical trajectory just kind of continues. So it's quite neat. It just bounces off, but it continues moving down as it was before. So now I've got my 5 grenades just sitting on the ground stationary. So I suppose the next thing to add is to use this timer and to add in some kind of explosion when the fuse reaches the end. But that will take quite a bit of time because I'll need to create a separate class for handling explosions that are going to run as an animation after these grenades explode. So I'm going to do that in a separate video. For now, if you found this video useful, then please do leave a like, and if you want to stay up to date with these, then feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching.